All right, I think we are ready to get started. So hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our event, our Cybersecurity and Digital Forensics Career Panel Discussion and Open House. Today we'll be talking about the evolving landscape of cybersecurity in the digital forensics industry and how Champlain College Online programs can help you stay relevant. My name is Amanda and I will be moderating this session today. Just to get us started with a few session logistics, we want to make sure that your speakers are on so you can hear us loud and clear. Next, please make sure that your either your audio, your phone is muted and your camera is off. If you have any questions throughout this webinar or this event, you can enter them into the chat feature through Zoom. If for whatever reason you have a question that you'd prefer not to share publicly, we'll give you instructions at the end of the session on how to share that back so we can make sure to get your questions answered. And please make sure when you do type your question into the chat that it goes to everyone so we're able to see it. And then lastly, this session is recorded, and within a week after this event, we'll be sharing this back with all of our attendees so you're able to refer back to it as you see fit. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves. Speakers, if you could kindly introduce yourselves, tell us your name, your roles and responsibilities at Champlain College Online, and any past industry or academic experience you'd like to share with the group.
Good morning, or excuse me, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kathleen Hyde, and since 2017, I've been chair of cybersecurity programs. I'm also assistant professor at Champlain College Online, and officially I am the program director for the undergraduate Computer Forensics and Digital Investigations degree, as well as the Computer Information Systems and the Web Design and Development degrees. And then I'm also the program director at the master's level of our Masters of Science in Information Security, which has operations and management concentrations. And then previously, before I became chair of cybersecurity programs, I was an adjunct instructor for Champlain College Online, teaching primarily cybersecurity courses. And in my current role, my responsibilities include overseeing the programs, the faculty, and course scheduling and development, and also the design and implementation of new programs, such as our new certificate in data science. Prior to coming to CCO, I worked as an information technology and information security consultant. I've been doing that since the mid to late 1990s. And before that, and this goes to those of you who are career changers, I started out as a news reporter and investigative journalist. That was one of my first careers. And with that, I'll turn that over to you, Sergio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sérgio Tenas Magalhães. I know it's a hard name to pronounce. I'm an associate professor here at Champlain College Online, and I'm also a chair of cybersecurity since August 2018. I'm the program director of the cybersecurity undergraduate program and the software development undergraduate program. And at the master level, I'm the program director of the Master in Digital Forensic Science. I also oversee, just like Kathleen, a few undergraduate certificates in the fields related to cybersecurity. Prior to coming to Champlain College Online, I was actually in Europe, in Portugal, where I'm from, and I was an academic for 16 years there, so 18 years now, doing teaching in the fields of technology and cybersecurity and doing research in the field of cybersecurity. In my research, I would highlight my participation in a project for the Portuguese Armed Forces, securing their data network, and my participation in the NATO project in cyber defense education and training. I focus especially in biometric technologies for authentication. I was also a founder, and I worked in that company for some time too, of a consulting firm in the field of cybersecurity. So I have that connection to the real world, both in terms of technology and policies. And I think that sums up my last 2 decades in this field.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathleen and Sergio. So to get started, we'll ask our first question to you both. So what is one hard skill and what is one soft skill that you believe are critical for anyone, regardless of their role, entering the field of cybersecurity, information security, or digital forensics more broadly?
Well, I'll get us started, Amanda, with a hard skill and a soft skill. And for the hard skill, I would have to say that it's networking. Understanding how networks work, and that means everything from the cabling to the protocols to ports, is absolutely critical if you're working in cybersecurity because you have to understand how networks work if you are going to secure them. And that's whether it's physically or otherwise. How will you know what ports to block and what ports need to be open if you don't understand networks? How will you be able to select an appliance or security as a service vendor to meet business needs? Again, if you don't understand how a network operates, how it's put together physically and then also virtually. Um, in digital forensics, of course, networking is essential because you may be tasked with responding to an incident, such as a breach. And if you don't understand networks, it's going to be very difficult to investigate the breach because you may be called to pinpoint the attacker's IP address in a PCAP file using Wireshark, and that's going to be difficult at best if you don't understand networking. On a more basic level, if you've ever had to try to troubleshoot a network connectivity issue and you don't know about networks, you may spend hours troubleshooting the reason for dropped packets when it's something as simple as the cable is too long. With respect to soft skills, I would have to say, from my perspective anyway, both coming from the academic perspective, but also the business perspective, having been a consultant, it's that ability to communicate effectively. In the tech industry, and especially in cybersecurity and digital forensics, we spend a lot of time communicating. We do that in writing. We do that via email, which of course would be writing, but digitally. We also do it, speaking to end users as well as the C-suite. We spend that time documenting and talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we can do better. And what may end up happening is that you may have to explain to an end user why they can't use the same password for all of their accounts. And you may have to do that in the morning. And I'm sighing as I even say that of thinking about somebody using the same password on all accounts, because we all know that's not a good idea. And then in the afternoon, you may end up having to explain to a CISO why we need to be concerned about attempts to access files that are showing up in logs. And so we need to be able to communicate effectively and efficiently. For those who are involved in digital forensics, of course, you have to be able to explain how you've conducted the forensic examination and also what the results of the analysis were. A lot of times you're going to have to submit written reports for your work. And you're also potentially, especially if you're working in digital forensics that involve law enforcement capacity, you are going to have to provide expert testimony, possibly in court. So that's why I think that having that effective communication is an absolute must for a soft skill.
Well, I would go with, for a hard skill, I would go with encryption, decryption, and everything cryptology related. Cryptology allows us today not only to guarantee the confidentiality. The word guarantee is always dangerous in cybersecurity. It's that level of security versus the risk that we, on a methodologically sound way, assessed. But actually, with some technology, we can still guarantee the confidentiality. But cryptology also allows us today to do non-repudiation, make sure that if we have something, we know exactly who was the person that did that change or created that file. It also allows to guarantee the integrity of data. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, being able to use cryptographic technology, both for encryption and for decryption, because you don't want to lose the data after it was encrypted, it's a critical hard skill that people need to not only be able to use, but understand what's going on behind the scenes so that they can choose the cryptographic approach that fits the needs, because it's always a balance. The more secure technologies also require more resources, more computational time, more energy, more money. They do take longer. So choosing the right approach for the right situation is a very critical hard skill for cybersecurity professionals. On the digital forensic side, cryptographic techniques are one of the biggest challenges that we have when doing digital forensics, because people tend to hide things that digital forensic experts are trying to find. And if they do a very good job in protecting that information, then the digital forensic expert has a very hard time recovering that information. So understanding how cryptology works, what are the vulnerabilities, how can we actually try to find something in there and sometimes recover the access credentials from the memory of the computer, which is something that we often see in movies, people seizing computers, closing down the laptop and taking them to the police station, and that doesn't work because we'll lose that information that is in volatile memory. So understanding all of that, I would say that it's a critical skill both for cybersecurity and digital forensics. On the soft skills side, I would go with the mindset. A cybersecurity professional has to develop a mindset that is oriented to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. A cybersecurity professional has a mindset that has a very low tolerance to risk. And so it's that mindset of low tolerance to risk, always looking for the vulnerabilities, but at the same time understanding that it's not about perfect security, but it's about that balance between the security that we need versus the risk that we know that we have. Balancing all of that is a critical soft skill for cybersecurity professionals. And on the digital forensic side, it's I would say almost the opposite. While respecting everybody's rights and understanding the need to protect the privacy of that people are entitled to, have the mindset of how do we break the privacy of criminals? How do we counteract all of those measures that cybersecurity professionals are trying to develop so that we can know what happened? How can we investigate the situation, an incident, a crime? So having that mindset that is basically the opposite of trying to find ways to get into what was protected by cybersecurity professionals. So those were the two. If I had to pick a hard skill and the soft skill, I would go with those two. Amanda?
Great, thank you both. So our next topic is the cybersecurity career landscape. And as I say this, I'm sure it sounds very broad to many of our audience members. So to help narrow this down a little bit for everybody, I wanted to get started by asking Kathleen to address the cybersecurity skill gap. So what does that mean? What does that mean to us on the call? And why is that really so important to address as a result, as part of this conversation?
I think it's important first to define what is the skills gap, and really what it is the difference between the number of skilled cybersecurity professionals and the number of available positions. So in cybersecurity, and this figure actually varies depending on the study that you research and that you're using to cite, but the gap is somewhere around 3 to 4 million, which means that the industry needs an additional 3 to 4 million skilled, qualified cybersecurity professionals worldwide if it wants to fill all of the currently vacant positions. Now, in the US, and this is according to last year's cybersecurity workforce study from ISC Squared, there were over 500,000 vacant positions that were identified as part of that skills gap. And this is where you hit the number where it's a higher level of the skills gap, basically the larger number than the 3 million that some studies cite. ISC Squared found that there were 4.07 million vacant positions worldwide. That was actually up from 2.93 million in 2018. So what ISC Squared found was that globally, the workforce needs to increase about 145% if it's going to cope with the surge in hiring demand. So where does that come in with what we're talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about the skills that you need as cybersecurity professionals. We're also going to be talking about how our programs here at CCO align with those needs and will help develop those skills so that we can help develop that next group of students, then professionals who can help fill that gap. Amanda?
Great, thank you. So Sergio, what kind of skills do you need to be successful in cyber or information security more broadly, and sort of who's a good fit for that?
Well, who's a good fit is a question that brings us back to the mindset. And the mindset is part of who you are, but also part of the training that you get and the exposure that you have to several situations. But I would say that you need to develop strong technology skills, and then you need to understand and develop skills in the several fields of cybersecurity. Some of them, I would say, more oriented to hard skills like networking that Kathleen mentioned, or encryption, mobile communication, mobile security, or some knowledge about digital forensics, incident response, ethical hacking. But also in the soft skills, communication, and policies, which are a combination. Security policies are a combination of technical knowledge with organizational knowledge, with understanding of who people are and how they react to situations, and how much can we ask of them, and what's the best way to have them interact with the organization and with the infrastructure, so that things go as good as possible. So that's the type of skills that we need to develop: a strong technology background, understanding networks, understanding programming, being able to do that and to work with that, and then the specific components of the technology world of cybersecurity and the specific components of the policy world of cybersecurity. And in the digital forensics field, again, a strong understanding of what's going on, how does this work, and then of what is available to us as tools to do our work as digital forensic experts, and also the knowledge of programming to automatize some of the functions, but also to understand how some of the things happen behind the scenes, because they are all programs, it's all a lot of software, but also understanding how people work, how people think, how they act, so that everything comes together for the goal. Yeah, that would be it, Amanda.
Thanks, Sergio. So to follow up on that, and to follow up even further on Kathleen's earlier point about the talent shortage, do you feel that someone who's looking to enter this field needs a cyber background in order to be successful?
Well, that's a tough question. We do know of many companies that with all this gap are trying to provide some training to people with a knowledge on general IT to make them fit to work in cybersecurity or digital forensics. But I would say that while I understand why companies are doing that, the truth is that that is not enough to be a fully grown, I would say, a fully grown professional in this field. It is necessary to, if your goals are set high and you want to be really successful and be able to access higher positions and also be able to do your work with confidence, you do need to have training, specific education in the specific fields of cybersecurity and digital forensics to reach those higher positions. And if you look at the job market, while you do find people doing in-house training, you see companies preferring to hire people that already have a strong knowledge in the field, but they don't necessarily need to have professional background in cybersecurity or digital forensics. You can transition from one field to the other as long as you have that education from an institution that is recognized by the community. And luckily, Champlain College has worked to gain that prestige. And Champlain College is a very well recognized institution. We are part of the network of excellence recognized by the government. It's a great institution to provide that knowledge to. And so I would say you can transition, but you need to have that strong knowledge coming from someone that has that stamp of quality that is recognized by the community.
Thank you, Sergio. Kathleen, thinking more broadly back to the industry, what kinds of organizations in your experience that you're seeing out in the world are hiring cybersecurity professionals, and for what kinds of roles are they hiring for?
Well, I think most organizations, certainly if they weren't before what has happened recently with the pandemic, they are hiring cybersecurity professionals now because of all of the remote work. But nearly every organization is either hiring professionals for in-house positions, or they are hiring vendors who are offering security services. And in turn, those vendors are hiring staff to fulfill the positions that they have open based on the need that is being created by the organizations that are hiring them. So the one thing that we have to keep in mind about cybersecurity positions is just how much cybersecurity touches every single part of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit, a business, a government agency, even if you have a sole proprietorship, you're accepting credit cards, you're going to have cybersecurity touch every aspect of that organization. So what I like to do is I like to break down the roles based on whether they're technical, non-technical, that type of thing. And so I've got some examples that I'd like to share. For example, in a more non-technical role, you would have somebody as a cybersecurity awareness trainer, or you might have somebody who's working in a call center. You might have somebody who's working in project management, but managing or assisting somebody who's overseeing a cybersecurity project where they're the cyber expert, you are the project manager, and you are assisting them. You might also have a staffing director. So those would be the people in HR who are hiring cybersecurity professionals, who still have to have a knowledge of what the industry needs are, what the expectations are for the qualifications. And then they work on developing the job descriptions and seeking those professionals who would be able to be hired for the positions and vetting them. Then you have the technical, and this is what most people commonly think of with respect to cybersecurity. Those would be your security engineers, your security analysts, security administrators, forensic engineers, vulnerability assessors, cryptographers, people who analyze malware, cyber threat intelligence analysts. Those are more of the technical, the hands-on, where you're actually working in cybersecurity and you're working with malware and you're trying to figure out what happened, what you're going to do about it. You also have the roles of leadership. And those are changing a little bit because right now we've got cybersecurity, but we're also seeing a lot more come in on the risk management front and risk assessment front. But for leadership, we have chief information security officers, chief security officers. You also have privacy officers. And then compliance and risk managers, and then security product managers. So as you can see, there are many, many different roles that need to be filled. Not all of them are technical. Some of them are entry level. Some of them are also executive level. There really is a place for new professionals coming into the field, provided that you have, as Sergio mentioned, you've attained that level of achievement within cybersecurity and you have a certain understanding of the concepts and application of them. For pretty much everybody to come in and find a place. Even if you are a career changer and you are transitioning, say, from HR, you could transition into a role that is more cybersecurity focused.
Thank you, Kathleen. So tagging on to that, your sort of last comment there about transitioning from an HR program into a cybersecurity program, or excuse me, a career. I have a last question for Sergio in this section is that, if somebody was deciding to go back to school for a cyber degree or a certificate, what are some of the things that they should look for in a program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amanda. Thank you. So, few different things, some more obvious than others. So, a strong foundational knowledge in the several fields of technology. Any cybersecurity program should start by giving that strong foundation in networking, in programming, so that they actually know what they are doing instead of clicking buttons in tools. They should also have several domains of the technology part of cybersecurity, and ideally with some electives that will allow them to specialize in fields that are more appealing to them. This includes mobile security, blockchain, so a lot of different fields so that they get exposure, but also some level of specialization in their choice. So they should have electives that allow for that. The program should also include classes related to cybersecurity policies. Either you'll be developing them or updating them, or you'll be helping to implement them. It's a really critical field to learn about, with all the standards that are associated with it and all the methodologies. And then I would go into the things that are maybe not that obvious. It's important to have a body of instructors that are scholar practitioners, people that understand the science that goes to cybersecurity and digital forensics, but they also understand what's going on in the real world, what's happening in the industry. And it's important to have both. I think it's more than clear why it's important to have practitioners. Real life sometimes is very different from what the books can teach you. And so having that experience from concrete situations where a challenge came and how that is solved, and having that experience is really important. But it's also important to have the scientific knowledge to support this, so that we are not limited to what's going on in the industry, not only what's being done, but what should be in place in the industry at this moment. So that scholar practitioner is very important, and a student looking for a program in this field should look for a faculty team that has that. It is also really important to look for a program where the general education program aligns with the professional needs. General education is critical for the development of somebody that goes through higher education, but it's important that there's a way of connecting that with the reality of working. And so it's important to also look for that general education program that aligns with the needs of the jobs. And also look for an institution that understands that teaching an adult, it's not the same as teaching somebody that is 18, 19, 20 years old. Adults have different responsibilities in their lives, have different needs, have different expectations, and have different ways of learning. So also look for an institution that understands that and works towards that in addressing the specific needs of adults. And so by covering the technology, the policy, the general education, having the right faculty, and then having the right mindset, that would be a program that that somebody should be looking for.
Great, thank you, Sergio. Kathleen, before we move on to our next section, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think Sergio covered it fairly well. That's why he is chair along with me, because we work really well together.
Perfect. All right, moving right along then. So our next section, and Kathleen, you alluded to this a little bit in one of your earlier answers, so I'm glad we're covering this a little bit more in depth here, is cybersecurity careers and the current COVID-19 pandemic. So given the current COVID-19 pandemic, do you think that the outlook for cyber and InfoSec jobs is better, is it worse, or is it about the same? And then why do you feel that way? So maybe Kathleen, you could get us started with that.
Ooh, better, worse, or about the same? You know, I actually prefer to say that the outlook is solid. And the reason that I say that is cybersecurity is not going anywhere. Threats are not going anywhere. They're not decreasing, they're increasing. So it's solid. So I'd have to say it's solid, or if I have to select one of those, it's a little bit better. So in other words, we're going to continue to see the skills gap. During COVID, we may have shifted how we work. Certainly, most colleges were online, of course, so it didn't impact us. But the colleges that weren't online, they had to shift what they were doing with their students. With businesses, a lot of them shifted to working remotely. And businesses have, because of the risk assessments, decided that for a lot of them, they're going to continue having their employees work remotely for the foreseeable future. And what we're also seeing is that some companies have decided now, with remote workplaces in existence, that they're not even going to renew leases for physical office space. So I think we're going to continue seeing people who are working remotely. Now, correspondingly, what we've seen is that there have been a number of increases in attacks, specifically because of the remote work. We've seen it on the remote workers. We've seen it on businesses, certainly social engineering. And as we're moving towards the elections, we're seeing it with that. With respect to COVID, just in recent days, we've seen that attacks on intellectual property, specifically the vaccines. So what I'm trying to say is that we are going to continue needing qualified applicants for cybersecurity and digital forensics positions. And I think that with COVID, obviously it's magnified that a bit, but I think there is just so much that is happening, so much that changes on a daily basis with respect to technology, that the outlook is going to continue to be solid. Amanda?
Thank you. Sergio, what do you think? Same question.
Yeah, Amanda, I would say that it was always good. It's going to continue to be good, the perspective for cybersecurity and for digital forensics. It's true, COVID made it even slightly better. It's interesting to notice that with all this situation, the unemployment numbers grew a lot, and there's a huge problem of unemployment in the country, but not in the technological field. Unemployment rates in the technological field were extremely low and continue to go down. And as Kathleen mentioned, the numbers that the organizations need in cybersecurity and digital forensics professionals are unbelievable. And what happened with this situation is that a lot of companies felt the need, just to survive, to transition either entirely or partially to the digital world. I'm thinking, for instance, of Inditex and the Zara, one of the biggest chains of apparel selling in the world, more than around 4,000 stores around the world. They are cutting 1/4 of their stores because they are investing more in online, in selling online. A lot of the companies had to rethink how they operate. And we see the NASDAQ going up and beating records because of that. The entire economy turned even more to the digital space and relies even more on technology to survive and to prosper. And with that comes the need for new solutions, developing new platforms, developing new tools to operate and to reach the consumer. Digital marketing grows. But at the same time that we develop all of that, there's a liability associated with operating so much data. And with that liability comes the need for cybersecurity professionals and also for digital forensic experts that might post factum discover where did we fail when something happened, what can we do better, who did this, how can we go beyond with this. But not only there's the liability issue of dealing with so much data, there's also the survival of the company now that everything depends on the technology infrastructure. And so I agree with Kathleen. It's solid. It has been solid for many, many years. It's going to be solid for many, many years. Cybersecurity and digital forensics are not going anywhere. But if we have to choose, yes, we are now even better in this field than we were a few months ago before the crisis.
Great. So I guess I'll continue asking you, Sergio. So what changes do you think that the industry is going to be facing because of COVID-19 and how they'll need to sort of adapt moving forward?
Yes, there's the organizational change itself of how the business model shifts more to the digital, but also how they operate is changing. And one of the things that we'll see more and more is remote work. And from the infrastructure technology, for those listening to us that have some knowledge on technology, a lot of organizations had this approach that was almost medieval of raising up a wall around the organization, a digital wall to try to protect the organization. Now, what happened is that people are no longer inside the walls. They are working from home. We also saw that before with commercial teams being everywhere, but now it's even more. Almost nobody is inside the wall when they actually have some place that they could call their base, because like Kathleen said, some companies are just not using any physical space anymore. But that changes the infrastructure, but also the speed, the need to react fast. One of our instructors commented he works in a role that is associated with the COVID response. And one of the problems that he has to work with is to vet everything that is being developed at a fast pace. We need technology to gather information about what's going on. We need to reach the consumer faster. We need to grow our infrastructure very fast. At the same time, we need all these professionals to make sure that it works in a safe environment that protects data, that protects the company. That is a huge transformation from what we saw a few decades ago, when the focus was on convenience and functionality. Non-functional requirements are now extremely important, more than ever, and that changes the need that we have for professionals that are not associated with function, but associated with protecting the function and the data. Yeah, that I would say that is the main thing, the main.
Thank you. Kathleen, what do you feel that the changes that the industry is going to face because of COVID-19?
I think one of the things that we're seeing already is just a need to fill that skills gap because of the change to remote, because of the unemployment rates. We're seeing organizations, and this is partially in response to the skills gap, but it's just kind of being magnified now. We're seeing organizations look at different ways to bring in skilled talent and to develop skilled talent, either in-house or through people who are coming in as career changers. So the industry is actually seeing a bit of a shift in the requirements that are necessary to break into a position in cybersecurity. And they're looking for degrees still in many positions, and they're also looking for skills acquisition. And I would say that going back to what Sergio said about, do you need a cyber degree or certificate? What things are you looking for in a program? One of the things that you do need to look for when you're looking for a program is not only having that academic credential, but also the skills acquisition, because that's going to make you a more qualified candidate and also a more valuable employee if you are one of the people who is trying to upskill. And that's something we're seeing a lot of in response to COVID, is that people are trying to upskill. So that's one of the things on the employment front that I see that is changing. The other thing, of course, is just that the attacks are changing, and so the industry is having to constantly respond to new and different types of attacks. And I think that business email compromise, that has really taken off. Some of those are specific to COVID. Some of those are specific to COVID and its relation to the healthcare industry. Those are just some of the things that I'm seeing when I'm out in the field and I have my ear to the ground and I'm listening to what everybody else is saying, or I am looking at what the breaches are that are taking place, and also listening to government resources and people who are conducting incident response.
Great, thank you both. So our last section here before we move into the Q&A portion of this session is a little bit more specific to Champlain College Online. So how are the Champlain College Online programs aligned with the cyber landscape?
I guess I can get started if you want, Sergio. Do you want me to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, I was hesitating. I would love to hear your feelings, but the first thing I would say, even before turning the mic to you, is as shares of cybersecurity, both me and Kathleen, we really do our best, and I think we do. I'm not going to be humble about this, but we really do a great job in making sure that our programs align with everything that we were saying. It's not just talk the talk, it's walk the walk, and I do believe that we do that. But Kathleen, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to distinguish is basically cybersecurity versus digital forensics. And I think what we're really talking about is the before and then the after. So you've got cybersecurity, which is your prevention. That's your vulnerability assessments, figuring out what exploits adversaries could use to attack you, developing the defense mechanisms, defense in depth, defense in breadth, and then taking it beyond that as well. And then you have, so that's the prevention side of things. And then you have the after, which is, after you've had a breach, after you've had an incident, after you've had something happen where you have been compromised, you have the digital forensics. That's where it comes into play, where you're going to figure out and assess what happened, when it happened, who was responsible, and then do an after action based on that. If you're doing incident response, and we're specifically talking about something such as a breach, how can we improve our processes? How can we improve our policies? What can we do differently so that next time we are not going to be vulnerable and we won't have this happen again? So I really think that that's how we kind of look at the whole ecosystem. And then, of course, we have our degrees that are designed around that. So we have our cybersecurity degree, and then we have the computer forensics and digital investigations degree on the undergraduate side that are dealing with both of those two components of cyber. And then on the graduate, we have, of course, digital forensics, and we have information security, which kind of mirror, cybersecurity and information security. Information security, I always like to remind everybody, because this is my thing, that cybersecurity is digital. Information security is really looking at the overlay of all data, all information within an organization. So that means that piece of paper that is in the copier or in the fax machine, as well as the digital assets. And then, of course, we have the forensics, the digital forensics, which is mirroring basically the digital investigations on the undergrad. And Sergio?
Yeah, I would like to add for those of you hearing that might be wondering, what about when it's going on? Well, when the attack is going on, it's all hands on deck. So it's cyber and it's forensics. With that mindset that cybersecurity professionals will be looking at the attack with the mindset of trying to stop it and prevent it from spreading or data to be leaked, while the digital forensics experts are trying to understand how are they doing this, what vulnerabilities are they using, and also making sure that all the evidence that might be needed later is being protected and acquired. So just to add that, but yes, there's that. I'd also like to say in this landscape that because we have been talking about that foundation that everybody in cyber and forensics needs, both the undergrad and cyber security undergrad and digital forensics have that foundation that is shared. And so, yeah, that's all I have to add.
Well, and I think it's one of those things, we've discussed this, Sergio, is that undergraduate students really need to have that foundation in programming. You need to understand that because you're going to be dealing with programs and operating systems and networks, of course, in both fields of study. But also, we like to have kind of that transference so that cyber students are going to learn the forensic analysis, and you're going to have the CFDI students who are also going to be taking cybersecurity courses. So there's that transference of both aspects of the degrees into the other. So you have a common beginning point, and then the cyber students really specialize in cybersecurity, and the digital investigation students are really looking at the forensic side of things.
Yeah, that's correct. And I would also like to highlight that it's important that the knowledge of programming is approached from a perspective that is current. So um, you can learn programming in many different ways, but if you're going to work in cybersecurity and digital forensics, it's crucial that you know how to program in Python. That's what we need today to learn. So learning how to program in general, be exposed to as much information as possible is always relevant for any field. But the fact that both undergrad programs are learning Python, I would say that it's also very relevant, and making sure that that we have relevant and current electives available for our students is also something that is very important. So yes, that's it.
Great,
Amanda?
thank you both. Yes, thank you both so much for wrapping that up so nicely. So from here, we'll transition over into our Q&A session. So before I do that, I just want to thank our speakers for taking their time to answer all these great questions and go through all these important topics with us today. I think even just on a personal level, I found it very interesting and I learned quite a lot. So I hope all of you on the call as attendees feel the same way. So moving into our Q&A portion, I have a couple of notes to share with everybody as we've had some people join and drop out throughout the session. So there's two ways for you to submit a question to us today. The first one is you can submit it via the chat function, which if you can see on the bottom right-hand side of your Zoom screen, there should be a little chat icon. You can just type your question right in there and we'll get it and feed through in our last couple of minutes. Secondarily, if there's some reason that you have a question that you prefer not to share publicly, or maybe it's a little bit more of a complex question, you are more than welcome to submit it to us via email. We just ask that you include your first name, your last name, and your email. The session that you attended, so whichever session your question is appropriate to, whether it's the main session or subsequently our breakout sessions, which we'll go over in a couple minutes. What your question is, and then email it to alan@champlain.edu. So I'll leave this screen up on while we go through our questions so you can see the email address. And keep in mind too that this same screen will be in each of your breakout sessions as well. So if you didn't quite catch the instructions or didn't see the email address, it's not your last chance. So great, so we have about, I'm gonna say 8 minutes left before we transition to our next section. So I will go through some of the questions that we're getting in the chat right now. So the first one is, and Sergio and Kathleen, I'll let you after you hear the question, decide who wants to take the first pass at it. So the question is, I hold a master's in business and about halfway through my bachelor's in cybersecurity at Champlain. What opportunities would I want to consider upon completion of my bachelor's?
I think a lot of that depends on where you see yourself and what you want for a career after graduation. And the reason I say that is different careers are going to have different requirements. I think the fact that you have a master's in business poises you very well to transition into cybersecurity because you understand business. A lot of businesses are looking for that combination of somebody who is business savvy and then also understands cybersecurity because you're going to already be familiar with risk and liability. I think a lot of it, though, depends on what you plan to do with cybersecurity. What type of career interests you? Are you looking for a more hands-on career? In other words, being a basically doing penetration testing, or are you looking for doing vulnerability assessment? Or are you looking to move into maybe policy and compliance field, a position in policy and compliance specifically related to cybersecurity? So I think a lot of it depends on that. And I guess I would defer to Sergio, since you're the program director for the cybersecurity undergraduate degree program, if you have specific recommendations for that student.
Amanda, can you please clarify? You said that the student is halfway through the undergrad or the grad?
Yes, absolutely. They're about halfway. They hold a master's in business, and they're about halfway through their bachelor's in cybersecurity.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that being halfway through the bachelor, it's actually the right time to start looking into the future. But I totally agree with Kathleen. It's all about what you love, what will make you feel happy. So cybersecurity has a very broad field of work. And I always say this, we have the luxury of being able to choose a path inside cybersecurity that makes us happy. And cybersecurity professions are very demanding. There's actually a lot of work about the level of stress that affects cybersecurity professionals because of all the responsibility that we have and all the risks that are always that cybersecurity professionals face. So my first recommendation would be follow a path that makes you happy. But yes, there's that possibility of a technology approach and just shifting towards that technology approach, and with the advantage of coming with an MBA, understanding the organization, understanding the profit oriented and all of that. But there's also the possibility of using this bachelor as a tool to enrich your previous experience that comes from that MBA. You will be in a unique position to be a high-level manager in a company that sells security products because you understand the business and you understand the technology. And as Kathleen mentioned, you are also in a very unique position to work in the policy and compliance fields. And I would like to mention something that we didn't talk yet until now, that as the world becomes more interconnected, and now with the COVID thing, I wouldn't say that the world is smaller. It has grown in the past months with no flights here and there, but the world is still pretty much interconnected digitally. And many countries are developing very specific standards that are mandatory and laws to protect data. And so a company in the US needing to work with Australia or Brazil or with the European Union has a lot of requirements, compliance requirements to go through. And a student that has an MBA and has a bachelor in cybersecurity is in a unique position to be in that type of role. Amanda?
I think we've got one here in the group chat. Sergio saying they're halfway through their digital forensics bachelor's degree, and they were wondering if we would be talking a little bit about breaking into the industry, what a good entry-level job they're looking for, and what the interview process is like for a digital forensics position. One of the things that I always counsel any student, whether they're at CCO or they're at another institution, if they're, or anybody who even says to me, I want to go into digital forensics, there are going to be a couple of different things that you need to think about when you want to go to apply for that first position. And when you are in your program is the time to start thinking about them. The first thing is, if there's any way that you can do an internship in digital forensics while you are a student, I absolutely, with 100% say go for it, do the internship, because that will provide you with extremely valuable experience. It also provides you with connections to the industry. And a lot of students who participate in the internship process and the internship experience in digital forensics, that becomes a way for them to move from either their current position to one in digital forensics or to move into digital forensics. Having that experience is invaluable because it gives you that real world of this is what you're going to be doing, so that you can decide whether or not you like it, whether or not you want to move into, say, the cyber digital forensics aspect of it, or you want to go strictly into a law enforcement digital forensics field. So internships are critical. The other thing about breaking into the industry is becoming part of the industry. And when I say that, what I'm really talking about is belong to a trade organization, belong to a community that is comprised of digital forensics examiners and practitioners. And that's because you're going to find in that community that you can network with other people. You are going to have access to positions that are available and that are open or becoming available. And that is because of that network and the communication that takes place in the organizations. Most of them have online bulletin boards, things like that, where you can search for open positions. A lot of what happens in the field of digital forensics is done by word of mouth. They still operate very much on the it's a friend of a friend, or I know somebody who, and so you want to make sure that you are connected some way in that community. Another way to develop connections is to look for digital forensics groups on places like LinkedIn. You'll want to follow people who are in the field. And that is because that, again, gives you another connection. It gives you a way to know what is happening in the industry before you're waiting for it to come out in an article maybe 3 months from now. So those are some of the things that you should do. The other thing that you should think about is you have your academic degree that you're working on, you're also going to want to think about certifications or additional academic certificates that show that you have specialized in a certain portion of digital forensics or cybersecurity, so that you have breadth. And you want to have the certifications because those are going to demonstrate that you can apply all of the digital forensic concepts. And so what I would say is that you really need to think about all of those. With respect to the interview process, it varies organization to organization. Some of them require extensive background checks. Certainly if you're going to work for the FBI, you're going to have an extensive background check. You need to be prepared for that. I say start thinking about that now. Start thinking about how you would respond, who you would have as references, who would give as references, realizing that the references that you give, they are going to look 3 and 4 basically tiers away from those to really get a sense of who you are and whether or not you have the ethical compass to be able to be a good examiner, and whether or not you have anything in your background that's going to be considered a liability or a potential means to be compromised. With respect to breaking into the industry, I've got to say that far and away the internships are going to be one of the things that combined with the degree is going to help you, because you already have experience.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kathleen. Breaking into the industry, the internships are really important in the field of digital forensics. And I also agree that The interview process varies a lot from organization to organization and from type of organization to type of organization. But my recommendation would be prepare your mind for questions on different topics. So for instance, before going into the interview, review in your head and say, maybe take some notes and then review those on all the technologies that you have worked with, different operating systems, different digital forensic software. So kind of have a breakdown of all the things that you have been exposed to through your program. And you'll find that it's a lot. So it's important that you have that. And some of them might have taken those classes quite some time ago. So take a time to review them and see, okay, this was better for this and that was better for that, so that you can speak about that if questioned. And also be prepared for mindset questions. Kathleen mentioned the ethical framework. And so be prepared for questions where your interviewer is assessing your ethics and your resilience. So questions like, if you face this situation, how would you behave? And they are trying to understand if you follow an ethical path. And also, depending on where you're at, Kathleen and I often talk about this, regardless of where you're at and what you're doing, sooner or later in the digital forensic world, you're going to end up finding things that you wouldn't like to find and being exposed to things that you wouldn't want to be exposed to. Be prepared for a question. If you find this in your work, how would that affect you? How would you cope with that? So questions that talk about your ethics and your resilience associated with this work. That's my advice.
And one other thing I'd like to add to that is that if you only have minimal experience with a specific digital forensics tool, don't say that you have great experience with that digital forensics tool, because it could come back to haunt you that you've done that. Make sure that you are honest at all times with what your capabilities are. And a lot of the codes of ethics require you in cybersecurity and digital forensics to admit when you don't know something. And it's okay to say that you don't know something, but you want to make sure that you're upholding those industry standards, and that you are not going to be caught by saying, yes, I know EnCase, when in fact you've had very minimal experience with it. It's a question of your integrity. So you absolutely want to make sure that you
I
keep
totally
that in
agree.
mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would also like to say, don't fall on the other end. I only did this or that in EnCase, so I'm going to say that I don't know EnCase at all.
Correct.
It's that review of what you do, or what you have been doing for your program, and being able to say, well, in autopsy I have done this and that, or in EnCase I've done this and that. I have used X-rays for this or for that. So being able to talk about what you have done, what your experience was, kind of review the several situations you were exposed to your program, and be able to honestly say, I have worked with this and this, and I have worked with that and that. I've taken a class where we used Linux for this and for that, but I'm more comfortable with Windows. That's fine. But be honest. Kathleen's advice is great. Be honest. Don't be humble. Don't try to oversell yourself. Be honest.
So I see we've got another one here on the plans to offer certifications like CISSP, CCSP, CCSK, and CISM. We don't actually have plans to offer certifications per se. I just want to say that all of our programs in some way, shape, or form, for the most part, like for example, the CISSP, we touch on the domains that are covered in that certification. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that we have CMIT 450, which is a class, senior seminar project. And in that class, a lot of students opt to study for their certifications. And basically, sometimes at the end of that, they will actually sit there for their certification exam and obtain the certification. So with that in mind, you have the ability to earn college credit for studying for your exam as part of the senior seminar project. But our courses are designed so that we're not studying or giving you the training, so to speak, to pass a specific exam. We're giving you the concepts and the application so you truly understand it. And then you have the ability to augment that if you need to then sit for an exam. And then of course you can always take the course and specifically tie that to an exam.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for grabbing that off the chat for me. That was one I wanted to make sure we got answered.
Yeah, no problem.
So great. Thank you so much, everybody who entered questions into the chat. I know we could probably spend another hour, honestly, doing question and answer, but I want to make sure that we're able to transition over into our breakout sessions. So for everybody who did ask a question that is not answered, we're going to let your moderators know of the breakout sessions that you're about to attend so you can get them answered there. And again, if all else fails, if it still is, you don't get an answer, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the effect. So now we're going to transition to our breakout sessions. So each of you who are attending this event right now on your registration form chose a room that you wanted to, or a topic that you wanted to explore further. So this is going to be the breakout room that you're going to be moved into in just a moment. So you are welcome to change the room if you wish, but I would encourage you to keep in mind that we only have about a half an hour, and our presenters in these sessions do have a few slides to go over. So just be mindful of the time if you decide that you do want to switch to something else. You won't be able to do too much switching. If you do choose to leave, either to move to another session or to just leave the event entirely, you don't need to inform the moderator that you're leaving. So to move into the breakout sessions, all it's going to happen, you'll get a notification from me in about a minute or two that's saying you're getting invited to a room, kind of like what this this window here on the right says. So you're just going to want to join that room, and that will move you into the session. Like I said, if you do decide you want to change rooms, all you have to do is leave the breakout room. That will move you back to this main session where I will be staying online to move you into your preferred space. If you want to move into a new space, I ask that you type your first and last name and the session that you want to move into the chat, and I will manually reassign you from there. So, given all of that, I want to say thank you again to our main session speakers. Some of you will be in breakout sessions with them shortly. But again, thank you so much for your time and your really fabulous answers to all of our questions today. So with that, yes, thank you. So with that, I'm going to open our rooms, and you all should be able to transition right now.